Ms. Noem says she's grateful for God's hand in killing people in Texas. Here it is.
Matters a lot. I'm extremely grateful for God's hand in that whole situation because hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people were saved. And this is a time for all of us in this country to remember that we were created to serve each other. God created us to take care of each other. And that when we do that, we are happier, we are more fulfilled, and we can walk alongside people on their worst day and help them get through it and come out the other side, knowing that we can continue to live a life that God has purposed for us. So they're grateful for you. Several times the day after the flooding, you and Melania were on the phone with me, and I want to thank you for that. That meant the world. I was able to tell many of those folks that I had been visiting with you.
Put a full mass. So you're thankful for God's hand, grateful for God's hand. You know, the families of 110 dead people would have been thankful for a better damn policy. They would have been thankful for preventative measures. They would have been thankful for a proper warning. They would have been thankful for God to show up in the policies that you all execute daily. Kristi Noem says she's grateful for God's hand in the devastating Texas flood, the flooding that now has left over 100 dead and still counting. Social media was quick to call out the Secretary's remarks, quote, "How did God choose the people who survived?" Another act, "Wow, it's all okay because hundreds weren't killed?" Still another observed. Quote, "That's like saying, think about all the planes that landed after a horrific plane crash," one person wrote. So I'm going to give you a reminder. Trump spent the first months of his presidency gutting federal agencies and laying off thousands of federal workers, including FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the National Weather Service. FEMA's been deployed, and we're cutting through the paperwork of the old FEMA, streamlining it much like our vision of how FEMA should operate. And there's been a much better response to help these families get through this terrible situation, according to the lie that Secretary Noem said, pandering to Trump, obviously. So somehow less people, less expertise, less money, less budget equals better service. Kerr County authorities. Kerr County authorities discussed warning systems at least 20 times since 1987. That's officially on record, which means they've done a lot more off record. Since 2016, the topic of a, quote, flood warning system from Kerr County has come up 20 different times, 20 different county commissioner meetings, according to the minutes on record. The idea for a system was first introduced by County Commissioner Thomas Moser and Emergency Management Coordinator Doug Thomas. This happened March 2016. These are local people on the ground that actually know what folk who they care about need. So Moser noted that neighboring counties had much more advanced flood warning systems than their county. Quote, "Even though this is probably one of the highest flood-prone regions in the entire state, Kerr County's existing water monitoring mechanisms were not, quote, flood control or flood warning systems, policy failure." Thomas explained, adding, quote, "I think we need a system that can be operated or controlled by a centralized location, policy failure." Following the March 2016 meeting, the flood warning system was discussed 10 more times at 10 more commission meetings that year. But after the county failed to secure FEMA grant funding, budget policy issue to implement the system, it appeared to fall off the agenda. In a November 2020 discussion of a new FEMA emergency alert program, Thomas noted, quote, "We've been trying to get a new flood warning system here. We haven't been able to do it," end quote. Noem claims 1 in 6 survivors of the wildfires had to trade sexual favors for supplies. Yep. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem on Wednesday suggested that FEMA's response to the 2023 wildfires were so poor that 1 in 6 survivors had to trade sexual favors in exchange for basic supplies. A reference to a report on female Filipino fire survivors that one of the authors says is actually a gross manipulation of their work. In response to Politico's question about where the statistic came from, DHS sent a May press release containing a link to the report. The study, conducted by Tagnawa, which describes itself as a Filipino feminist disaster response organization based on Hawaii, surveyed 70 female Filipino fire survivors and found that 16% of those surveyed, roughly 1 in 6, engaged in, quote, survival sex in exchange for basic necessities post-disaster. Now, one of the authors of that report told Politico that the administration's reading of the data was just a misinterpretation. One Hawaiian activist responded with this statement: "I'm from West Maui. This is my hometown." That's a blatant lie. Every single person I know was either homeless, jobless, or both. No one was driven to such extremes. In fact, in short order, FEMA was on the ground helping people. I was on this platform talking to my governor. So according to the basic narrative on this line, the administration says, oh, yeah, this was FEMA doing it, when the survey was highlighting a socioeconomic dysfunction. All of a sudden, Noem is concerned about these folk if she can blame FEMA, but would not give a damn about these individuals, not in word or mention in memory, until it serves some type of political purpose. They're playing games with you, every single one of them. These individuals, unfortunately, have died because of, once again, bad policy. All right, dear brother, thoughts here.
Dr. Richey, I had my parents lose their home last year in a hurricane. It was a very scary time. I'm not trying to draw like a one-to-one line here between what happened to them and what happened, the tragedy in Texas. However, there is something to be said, I think, for after these kinds of events, when people come together as a community. And I do think there's something really beautiful about it. And I understand the idea of being like, hey, this is an example of God's love in that context. However, I think what Kristi Noem does here is what I think of as Mad Libs Christianity, where they kind of know that if they say God and then they fill in the blank with something, it's going to get them political points. And I think sometimes they slip up. And that's what happened here. And it goes to show that I think that kind of language is being used in a very maybe cynical or manipulative way in order to kind of ingratiate themselves with their own demographic. As for the study, it is very clearly like these studies are take pains to delineate exactly what they're doing and what they're studying, and because they don't want their stuff to be misinterpreted or for their conclusions to be misrepresented. And the conclusion of this study was that there needs to be more funding and there needs to be more attention put on this so that less discrimination happens in the future. To take that same study and then prop it up as reason to defund FEMA is completely antithetical to what the study was about. And I think that's got to be frustrating on multiple levels. But this was a survey done with a subset of a population of 70 people. And to take that and amplify it to the entire population is just completely misguided.
Yeah, and to your point about the God reference, typically if a person is in charge and there's a failure based on their decision making and they say, well, but God, it's because they don't want to talk about but policy.